In a narrow old alley of the village stood a small mud brick house. This house belonged to Jessica. She was an ordinary girl, but her dreams were anything but small. Her eyes carried the shine of ambition. She longed to build her own world, to live life on her own terms. But her desires never matched her parents' strict rules. Her parents wanted her to marry according to family choice, to live a simple, obedient life. But deep inside her, a spark of rebellion was always burning. She often thought, life comes only once, so why should I live it according to someone else's wishes? One day, that spark pushed her to take a step that changed her life forever. Blinded by youth, stubbornness, and passion, Jessica fell in love with a young man from her own neighborhood. Without thinking of the consequences, she left everything behind one night and ran away with him. At first, it felt like a dream, freedom, love, and new hopes. Jessica thought this was exactly what she had always wanted. But soon, reality tore the veil away. The man for whom she had sacrificed everything began to change just months after marriage. His temper grew harsh, his carelessness more visible, and then, one day, he abandoned her completely. Jessica was expecting a child at the time, alone, helpless, and ashamed. She had no way back, for she had already left her family and everything behind. Months later, she gave birth to a tiny child. The moment she held the tiny child in her arms, a strange sense of peace filled her heart. She named her Emma. Emma became Jessica's only support, but also her greatest trial. Poverty, hunger, and the cruel whispers of people all fell on her like mountains. She would often look at her daughter and sigh, "If only I hadn't been so stubborn. But now I must endure everything for your sake." Jessica began working tirelessly. She took up cleaning in other people's homes, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, and doing laundry. Along with the work came insults and taunts. "Isn't she the girl who ran away? See what became of her." But Jessica endured it all with a quiet smile. Behind that smile was one reason: Emma. At the end of the day, when she returned exhausted, Emma would run into her arms. The child's innocent smile eased all of Jessica's pain. She often thought, "So what if the world has abandoned me? My daughter is my whole world." Emma was a sweet and innocent child. Her wide eyes were always full of questions, and her lips were always carrying a smile. She would often circle around her mother and ask, "Mama, where's my papa? Other kids' fathers come for them. Why doesn't mine?" These questions pierced Jessica's heart. She would fall silent for a while, then gently hug Emma and say, "My love, your father has gone very far away, but I am here with you." Sometimes Emma would insist that her father come to school or buy her a toy, but Jessica, hiding her poverty and wounds, would only reply, "My child, your father will not return, but your mama will do everything for you." Emma would then wrap her tiny arms around her mother and whisper, "Mama, you are everything to me." Years passed. Emma had now turned 5. Jessica's hard work was bearing fruit, but life was still a struggle. She continued to clean houses during the day, returning in the evenings to care for Emma and focus on her education. It was during these days that she met a man named Michael. He seemed kind, well-mannered, and composed. Looking at Jessica, he said, "You shouldn't have to bear all this alone. I will support you. I will treat your daughter as my own." Jessica was stunned. She wondered if perhaps this was the answer to her prayers, a man willing to accept Emma as his own daughter. And from there, a new chapter of the story was about to begin. Michael's words lit small lamps of hope in Jessica's heart. For years, she had known only struggle, carrying people's taunts on her shoulders. But now, for the first time, someone spoke to her with respect. Someone offered her support. He was well-dressed, soft-spoken, his face carrying a calm smile. One evening he said to her, "I know you've suffered a lot. You don't have to live alone anymore. I want you and your daughter to live with me." Jessica felt, perhaps for the first time in years, that fate was finally showing her some kindness. She tried to hold down the fragile hope rising inside her, but Michael's words carried such sincerity that it was hard to resist. Whenever he looked at Emma, he would smile and say, "She's such an innocent child. Don't worry, I'll take care of her as if she were my own." Jessica's heart whispered, "Could this really be possible? Could someone truly accept my daughter as their own?" And at last, she gathered the courage to marry him. For a while after the wedding, life felt like a dream. Michael would bring toys for Emma, play with her, sometimes lift her into his arms. Jessica felt as though her daughter was finally receiving the love she had been deprived of all these years. At night, when Emma was asleep, Jessica would thank him softly. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You've given my daughter a father's love. That is the most precious gift in the world for me." Michael would simply smile and reply, "Just remember, you are no longer alone." But as time passed, the tenderness began to fade. Michael's behavior grew harsher. He started losing his temper over small things. One evening, when Jessica returned exhausted from work, he looked at her with a sharp tone and said, "What kind of state is this? A wife should keep the house beautiful, not go running around doing other people's chores all day." Jessica tried to answer gently, "I only do this for Emma, for her education, her future." But Michael snapped, "I earn, don't I? Then why do you need to work outside?" It was the first time she realized he was no longer the man she had married. One evening, Emma was sitting on the couch brushing her doll's hair. Out of nowhere, she asked innocently, "Daddy, how do girls become women?" The question had come from something she'd heard at school, where a teacher had said, "Daughters are tomorrow's women." Michael looked into her eyes with a strange smile. His voice was gentle, but carried something unsettling, as he said, "My dear, girls become women in a very special way. I'll tell you the secret. But remember, you must not tell anyone." Emma didn't understand, but she nodded, curiosity flickering in her innocent eyes. Jessica, busy washing dishes in the kitchen, overheard their voices, but thought nothing of it. To her, it was just a child's question. She could not have known these words were the first shadow of a storm that was about to strike her life. In the days that followed, Michael's behavior became stranger. Sometimes he showed Emma excessive attention, sometimes he scolded her harshly. Jessica grew puzzled, unable to put her finger on what was wrong. One night, Emma slipped into her mother's arms and whispered, "Mama, I feel scared." Jessica's heart skipped. "What scared, my child?" Emma paused for a long moment, then said nothing. She simply buried her face against her mother's chest and fell asleep. She carried the thought in her heart, but dismissed it as childish fears. She did not ask Michael a thing. Days turned into weeks, and the softness that once surrounded their home was gone. Michael's warmth had vanished, replaced with an edge Jessica could no longer ignore. More and more she felt she might have made yet another terrible mistake. Emma's smile grew rarer. Her eyes, once full of questions and joy, now carried only a strange, quiet fear. She spoke less, withdrew more, and then came the day that changed everything. In the stillness of the night, when the whole house was asleep, Emma's innocent world began to sink into the grip of darkness. One night, Michael quietly stepped into her room. The little girl had fallen asleep, clutching her doll. His voice trembled faintly as he whispered, "Emma, are you awake?" She stirred, opened her eyes, and gave a small smile. "Daddy?" Michael sat beside her and said softly, "Sweetheart, I want to show you what it means to become a woman, but this is our secret. You must never tell anyone." Emma was too young, too trusting. She nodded without understanding what those words meant. She couldn't imagine the cruelty about to be unleashed on her. That night, he shattered her innocence. Emma cried, begged, pleaded, "Daddy, please stop. It hurts. I'm scared." But Michael didn't listen. His cruelty went on. and her small world was torn apart. By morning, her face was pale, her eyes swollen. Jessica noticed immediately and asked with concern, "Sweetheart, are you feeling okay?" Emma looked at her mother with frightened eyes and whispered, "Mom, I'm scared." Jessica held her close. "Scared of what, my little doll?" Emma hesitated, then said softly, "Daddy says it's a secret. I'm not supposed to tell." Jessica's heart skipped, but she brushed it off as a child's vague worry. She kissed her daughter's forehead and said, "Come on, get ready for school now." She had no idea that her daughter's secret was really a nightmare. It didn't stop at one night. Michael returned again and again, finding moments when Jessica was out at the market or fast asleep. Each time, Emma cried through her tears, "Daddy, please don't. I'm too little. I'm so scared." But Michael's face only grew colder, harder. Mercy never touched him. Slowly, Emma began to change. The bright, curious child disappeared. She no longer laughed or asked questions. Fear settled into her eyes. At school, her teachers noticed her silence. One of them gently asked, "Emma, is everything all right at home?" She lowered her gaze and whispered, "Yes, everything is fine." Then she said nothing more. Jessica, too, began to notice. One night she pulled her daughter into her arms and asked, "Emma, why do you look so sad these days? Tell me everything." Tears filled the little girl's eyes, but all she said was, "Mama, I feel so scared all the time." Jessica's heart broke. She thought her daughter was frightened of the dark or of bad dreams. She comforted her gently. "You don't have to be afraid, my love. I'm here." She had no idea the truth was far darker than she could imagine. Michael's cruelty grew bolder. He began threatening Emma. "If you tell anyone, I'll leave you and your mother. You'll both be thrown out on the streets." Emma trembled at his words. She loved her mother too much to risk losing her, so she stayed silent. One day, as Jessica bathed her daughter, she noticed strange marks on her body. Alarmed, she asked, "Emma, how did you get these bruises?" Emma lowered her eyes quickly and murmured, "Mama, I fell while playing." She wasn't convinced, but she never even considered the unthinkable, that her own husband could be the monster hurting her child. Nights grew heavier. Emma often slipped into her mother's bed, curling up against her for safety. One night, half asleep, she whispered faintly, "Mama, I'm scared of Daddy." Jessica froze. She looked at her daughter's face, but the child had already drifted into sleep. Jessica tried to reason with herself, "Maybe it's just my imagination. Michael promised me so much. Could he really be like that?" She pushed the thought away. Months passed and Emma's light dimmed. Her eyes lost their sparkle. She stopped playing with her dolls, stopped laughing. She grew quieter with every passing day. Jessica's worry deepened, but she was still blind to the truth. She believed the man she had married was her support, never realizing he was the one crushing her daughter's soul. The darkness grew heavier around them, and Emma's silence became a scream only her heart could hear, but no one else was listening.
The night was deep, and silence had wrapped itself around the house. Jessica, exhausted, was asleep in her bed when suddenly a piercing scream shattered the stillness. It came from Emma's room, a sound so horrifying, so desperate. It was as if a soul was being ripped apart. Jessica bolted upright and ran, her heart pounding. She pushed open the door, and what she saw froze her to the core. Michael was bent over Emma, and the little girl was trembling violently. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she cried out over and over, "Mom, help me! Please save me!" A jolt of lightning seemed to pass through Jessica's body. She rushed forward and shoved Michael with all her strength. He stumbled back, but there wasn't the faintest trace of shame on his face. Instead, he growled, "This is all your fault. If you had understood me, I wouldn't have had to do this." His words struck her like poison. Jessica's voice shook as she cried, "What are you doing? This is my daughter, my life." Emma clung to her mother, sobbing uncontrollably. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Mom, he does this to me every day. He says if I tell you, you'll leave me." The ground seemed to vanish beneath Jessica's feet. Images flashed in her mind, every moment when Emma had tried to speak of her fear, and she had dismissed it, blind and trusting. Guilt stabbed at her heart. Why didn't I hear my child's screams? Michael still stood there, shameless, even daring to move closer. But this time, Jessica's eyes no longer held fear, only fire. She shouted, "Take one more step and I'll call the police. You've destroyed an innocent child, and now you'll pay the price." Michael laughed, as if the idea of her defiance amused him. But that night, Jessica's silence broke forever. Holding Emma tight, she picked up the phone and called the police. Her voice shook, but within it was the unbreakable strength of a mother. Within minutes, officers arrived. Michael tried to flee, but they overpowered him, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. For the first time, Emma's eyes showed a flicker of relief, watching her abuser dragged away in chains. Jessica pressed her daughter to her chest, wiping her tears. "No one will ever hurt you again. You are my life, my pride. I was late, but now I will protect you from every pain." That night, Emma fell asleep in her mother's arms. For the first time in many nights, she felt safe. Jessica stayed awake, stroking her daughter's hair, whispering silent prayers to God. "Give my child peace. I failed to see her pain, but for the rest of my life, I will stand by her side." The next day, the police filed a case. In court, when Emma spoke in her trembling voice, the room fell silent. Even the judge's eyes glistened. Michael was given the harshest punishment, his life swallowed by prison walls. For Jessica and Emma, a new journey began. Jessica left her business so she could give every moment to her daughter. She sought help from counselors and therapists. At first, the wounds on Emma's heart were raw and deep, but slowly, love and safety began to heal them. Months later, one afternoon, Emma came to her mother. Her eyes sparkled again. Wrapping her arms around Jessica, she whispered, "Mom, I'm not afraid anymore. You're my greatest strength." Hearing those words, Jessica felt her own broken heart begin to mend. She kissed her daughter's forehead and thought, life had burned them, scarred them, but in that fire, their bond had been forged into unbreakable.
After the court's verdict, it felt as though a new dawn had risen in Jessica and Emma's lives. Michael's life sentence lifted a heavy weight from their hearts, but the wounds carved into Emma's innocence would take time to heal. The early days were not easy. Many nights, Emma would wake screaming, clinging tightly to her mother. Jessica would hold her close, swallow back her own tears, and whisper, "I'm here. No one can hurt you now." For Emma's healing, Jessica sought the help of a child psychologist. Session by session, Emma slowly learned to give voice to her fear. Sometimes she painted her pain in colors. Other times she played it out with dolls. Little by little, the silence inside her began to break. Jessica had left her job to give all her time to Emma. She played with her, told her stories, and repeated, again and again, "You are not to blame, Emma. You are innocent. None of this was your fault." Those words became medicine to Emma's wounds. Slowly, she began to see her mother as her greatest strength. Time passed, and Emma returned to school. At first, she avoided everyone, but one day she raised her hand in class to ask a question. That single moment was like her voice stepping out of the prison of fear. When her teacher praised her, a spark returned to her eyes. One day, the school held Common Inspiration Day, where students spoke about their greatest hero. When Emma's turn came, she stood before her class and said, "My hero is my mom. She saved me, and she'll always be with me." The room went silent. Even her teacher's eyes filled with tears. When Jessica later heard what her daughter had said, a deep peace settled in her heart. Years later, Jessica began to share her own story with others. At workshops and community programs, she spoke to parents and women with a message: never ignore your child's silence. Sometimes silence is screaming the loudest. If I had listened to my daughter sooner, maybe she wouldn't have suffered so much. Emma, too, grew into a confident young girl. She stepped out of the shadows of fear and embraced the light. She became one of the most active students in her class, a true friend to her peers, and someone ready to walk new paths in life. One evening, Jessica and Emma sat in the park watching the sun dip below the horizon. Emma held her mother's hand and said softly, "Mom, I know what happened can never be forgotten, but you gave me the courage to live again. Now I feel like I'm alive once more." Jessica pulled her daughter into her arms, tears shining in her eyes. "We lost so much, but we still have each other, and that is our greatest victory." As the sun's fading colors washed over them, mother and daughter sat wrapped in that moment of light. Their story had become a symbol of strength and hope. And in the end, it carried a lesson for the world. Listen to your children. See the fear in their eyes. Give voice to their silence. Because sometimes a parent's attention can save an entire life.